guys, we're at lesson 2.1. This is video 2 and it's degrees and leading coefficients. So let's look at the vocabulary here in this section. So in some terms, when we're looking at the variable, we'll have exponents. So if we look at the terms such as 8x squared, this exponent determines the degree of the term. So if we look at this term, 8x squared, the degree is 2. So the degree of 8x to the third is 3. If a variable does not have an exponent, then it is the understood 1. For instance, if I had 8x, you don't see an exponent there, so it's the understood 1. Now, if a term has more than one variable, the degree is equal to the sum of all of the exponents. And let's look at this term here. We have 8x to the third, y to the second, z. Now, we want to know what is the degree of this term. Well, we've got 3 and 2, and there is no exponent on the z, but go up here and recall that the degree then is understood to be 1. So if you see a variable, we're talking about degrees, you might want to go ahead and write in the understood 1. So 3 plus 2, so 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6. Now, if there's a term that doesn't contain a variable, that degree is 0. For instance, 9. There's no variable at all, so the degree is 0. This is due to the fact that x to the 0 power is equal to 1. I'll explain that just a little bit right here. So if we were looking at 9 times x to the 0 power, if you recall, that's 9 times, you do the exponent first, so anything to the 0 power is 1. So 9 times 1 is 9. Okay, that's the formal explanation as to why that's true, but the main thing that you need to remember is if there is no variable with it, then the exponent or the degree is 0. So let's look at the example 2. So in example 2 here, it has 4 terms because you have 4 things that are added or subtracted together. The first term here would be 4x to the third, y to the second. That's your first thing. Your second term is being added is 2x to the second. The third term, now remember you're going to pick up the sign in front of it. It's not just 3, it's negative 3. So it's negative 3x. And the last term is called the constant, and that is 4. So coefficients are the numbers in front of the variable. So for the coefficient of the first term, that is 4. The coefficient of the second term, that is 2. The coefficient of the third term is a negative 3. And the constant is not a coefficient. It is the one without the variable. So the constant is 4. Now, let's look over here. We want to know the degree of this term. It has 2 variables. It's a 3, x to the third, and y to the second. There's a 3 and there's a 2. Those are the 2 exponents. So to find the degree of that term, you add those together, which gives me 5. So the degree of 4x cubed plus 4x cubed times y squared is 5. Here, this just has one variable, so it is the exponent that you see, which is just 2. This one is 3x. There isn't an exponent there, but there is a variable, so it's the understood 1. So the degree of that term is 1. Here we have 4, which is the constant. There is no variable at all, so the degree of that term is 0. Let's go on down to the next slide. In this slide, we're going to look a little bit more at some vocabulary. So here, a polynomial, when we write them, we typically list them in descending order of the degree, which means that you'll rarely see an expression that's written like this, where you have a degree of 2, then a degree of 3, a degree of 0, and a degree of 1. We want to write those in descending order. We much prefer it to be in order like this. So we have the 3, exponent of 3 first, then the exponent of 2, the exponent of 1, and the exponent of 0. We do this when we put it in this order. We call this this type of polynomial, we call that we say that we have put it in standard form. It's the standard form of a polynomial. So once the polynomial has been written in descending order or in standard form, the coefficient of the term with the highest degree is referred to as the leading coefficient. It's in the front, so it's leading. So that's only when it's in standard form, though. So additionally, if we're asked for the degree of the entire expression, it is the degree of the first term. So that would be its highest degree. Let's go on to the next slide here. I think we have some examples to look at. Okay, example 3 here. It asks us to give the leading coefficient and the degree of the polynomial. So if we look at this first example, we've got 1.8x plus 32. We want to make sure it's in standard form first. So we go up here and we check the exponent's the understood 1. So we've got 1 and then we've got the exponent of 0. So that is in standard form. So the leading coefficient, and I'm going to just abbreviate, the leading coefficient is the coefficient of the first term. So it's 1.8. The degree of the polynomial is the highest exponent, which would be 1. Over here, we're going to check and see make sure it's in standard form. So this has 4x to the third y squared plus 2x squared minus 3x plus 4. So let's talk about what the degrees are. Here, when you put those together, that gives you 5. That's the degree of 2, that's the degree of 1, and that has a degree of 0. So if we look here, it's in standard form because it's in descending order. The leading coefficient is the coefficient of the first term when it's in standard form. So that would be 4. The degree of the polynomial is the highest degree that you see, which is 5 here. So the degree would be 5 of this polynomial. Looking here, this last example that we have right here, it's not in standard form. If we look at it, we're going 2, 4, 0, 1. I'm going to write the 1 in here. So as we go through that, we want to put it in standard form before we begin. So we start with the highest exponent. So the first term would be 2x to the 4th. Then we would go to the next one, which would be a negative 2x squared. Then we'd go to the 1, so that would be a negative 4x. And then the constant, which is plus 3. So if we wanted our leading coefficient, is the coefficient of the first term, which is 2. And the degree of the polynomial is your highest exponent. So in this case, the degree would be 4. Now you have a couple here for the U-tries. If you'll stop the video for a moment, do those U-tries, check your answers in the solution guide, and make sure you got those right. Ask any questions that you might need.